I'm Mick Garris, and this is Post-Mortem. On the slab and under the knife, John Landis, as famous for comedy as he is for horror, but we'll talk about both of those things.
On the slab and under the knife. I wasn't told this.
No, well, we wanted to catch you off guard.
You did.
But you're a rebel. Let's talk a little bit about rebellion, because it's such a part of your movies, particularly the comedies. You know, Animal House, Blues Brothers, and even the horror films are very rebellious in their nature.
Well, they're both subversive, so I guess, yeah, I mean, in terms of a tenet of comedy and horror is anarchy. So like the Marx Brothers, or Laurel and Hardy will create anarchy in a social situation, and it's funny. And in a horror film, the loss of control is what anarchy means, and that could be pretty damn scary. You know, there's the old Dark House. Well, the whole movie, James Whale movie, the whole movie, they're dreading this character Saul, who's locked in a room upstairs because he's so dangerous and so out of control and so maniacal and so horrific, and the people speaking about him are all pretty scary themselves. So when Saul is finally released, there's such tension and dread, and then he's like this little tiny bald guy, and he's not scary, and he's very meek, and he says, they keep me locked upstairs, they're mean to me, and Melvin Douglas's character goes, oh gee, you know, like us, we like, oh gosh, we want to be protective. And there's this great like close-up of Saul, and he looks up, and he's just totally insane. And this actor's got this look, and you realize, uh-oh.
Old Dark House was one of the first movies that kind of combined horror with a sense of humor.
Oh, it's very funny. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to pull that off, but you do it really easily.
I'm not the first person to say, to point out how similar horror and comedy is. They are in that they're both involuntary. You know, what you want to invoke from the audience is a involuntary response, whether it's a gasp or a scream or a laugh. They're both spastic responses. They're convulsive, you know.
Physical responses.
Physical responses, yeah. They have great similarities in that, and great similarities in the adrenaline involved. You know, if you watch a really scary movie, your adrenaline's pumping, and if you watch a really funny movie, your adrenaline's pumping, and they're physical.
Well, what were the movies that first enchanted you? Were they horrific in nature? Were they comedic in nature?
I'm influenced by everything. I mean, I'm fascinated with people, you know, they go, what are your influences? And they pick someone out. Forget about it. I'm influenced by everything. The one absolute influence is Ray Harryhausen's Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which, you know, I think everybody has. What was your movie?
Well, it was probably Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, or Psycho.
Or Psycho?
Psycho was... The first one.
Did you see Psycho in the theater?
I saw it in a drive-in.
You remember watching it?
I remember it very well, yeah.
What sick parents you have.
Yeah.
Most people can tell you the movie, that moment where you're transported, you have suspension of disbelief, everything you're supposed to have. Very much the picture that influenced me, I guess, the most would be Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. So I loved fantasy and horror, but as a kid, I loved and still love, I kind of love everything. I really like Westerns. I wish I could make more Westerns, although they're not popular now. Walter Hill said, if they knew how much fun it was to make a Western, they wouldn't let us. And it's true, it's the most fun. But I like musicals. My wife thinks I'm gay. You know, I really like Broadway musicals. I really like that form.
It's bad when your wife thinks you're gay.
Well, it's not. Don't see 9, by the way. Anyway, I love cartoons. I love animation. I love Disney and Tex Avery. I mean, Tex Avery was really a genius. I mean, even if you're unaware of whose cartoon that is, there's a kind of sensibility that...
Well, there's a surrealism to what Tex Avery...
Oh, yeah.
Just the eyeballs popping and the Freudian aspect.
Well, the sexual aspects of Tex Avery are so overt and in your face. Even as a child, you're unaware of the erection metaphors, but when the wolf goes, doing, you know, all that stuff, you know something's going on there. I mean, Chuck Jones, I mean, there's so many great filmmakers, and, you know, Hitchcock, Buñuel. I mean, that's why I always think it's stupid when I dislike 10 Best or Your Favorite, because there's just too many movies that have nothing in common.
Do you think growing up in LA as a kid had a lot to do with you pursuing a career as a filmmaker?
It helped a lot in my pursuing a career as a filmmaker, but no, it was once I came home from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and I was 8 years old and said to my mom, who does that? Who makes the movie? And she said, the director. So literally from the time I was 8, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wasn't a cowboy, you know, I wasn't a spaceman. I really wanted to be a movie director. And in the 50s and 60s, really, it was kind of unfashionable. You know, I mean, I'm not the first to say this, but Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, Scorsese, De Palma, all these guys, it's revenge of the nerds.
Right.
Because these guys were the audio-visual guys. You know, they used to bring the projector into class.
Of the boomer generation.
Well, yes, okay, but that's who they are. They're people who grew up on movies. We had television, all of us. Mm-hmm. So we were exposed to a lot of old movies in a way that people aren't now, which is kind of too bad. But anyway, it was helpful being in LA and that's where Hollywood was. So I was able to seek out many, many filmmakers. In fact, it was unusual to seek them out. You know, Capra, Hawks, you know, all of them, Mamoulian, Alan Dwan. I really made a point of Bundy Martin, Andrew Martin, a director who really was very kind to me, like my mentor, got me my first 2 jobs on movies. Although a lot of them were kind of put off. It's like, I had George Stevens said to me, "You're not French." I mean, he couldn't figure out why I was interested in him.
Because nobody at that time was a film buff.
Kids weren't, yeah. And also, you know, it wasn't the director. It really was the 60s, late 60s, and very much the 70s is the director's decade where, I mean, the studio system was dying. I became a mailboy in 67 at Fox, and I watched the studios die. Because there are no studios anymore. People don't understand that.
They're conglomerates now.
Yeah, they're just
business entities.
They're distributors and financiers, but they're not filmmakers anymore. It's a different bottom line. And I mean, Lou Wasserman died was the end of it because you lost the mogul. Even though a lot of them were monsters, they were in the movie business.
They were hands-on movie people.
Well, they took risk, you know, which is all of the companies are loath to do now. And then when a picture like Transformers 2 makes the kind of money it makes, they go, "See, we're right." So you want to kill yourself.
So how were you able to go to Yugoslavia and work on Kelly's Heroes as a stuntman? This is 1969, I guess. You spent a couple years in
I was
doing PA work.
Yeah, I was a schlepper. I was a gopher, which is like a PA. No, Bundy Martin, Andrew Martin was a famous second unit director. He was a second unit director on Kelly's Heroes. And he said, if you can get to Yugoslavia, I was 18. I just turned 18. If you can get to Yugoslavia, maybe I can get you a job on the second unit. And I had made money over the years as a mailboy. I had almost, I think, $1,100 saved up.
Rolling in dough.
And it was $800 for a one-way ticket on TWA to London. And I bought it. Because I was such a schmuck, I didn't realize, you know, Belgrade isn't next to London.
Still a way to go.
Yeah. Anyway, so I went to Yugoslavia, which was hard because they're not close, and I had no more money. That was an adventure. And in '69, that was different times. It was behind the Iron Curtain, which meant something. It's a long story, but I worked on that film. I was there 9 months. The picture was a production disaster for MGM. MGM changed ownership 4 times during production. And it was really probably the best experience of my life because I had all the pleasure of making a film and none of the responsibility. But
you did a lot of different department work.
Yeah, I did everything. I mean, I was basically a schlepper, but I ended up being an AD for a while because the American first, the DGA first, had a nervous breakdown. And they'd drive him to the set, and he'd sit in the car and cry all day. And after like 3 weeks of that, they sent him home.
And they brought in this 18-year-old schlepper to take over.
And I was there.
Right.
I was like you. And but I met a lot of people on that show that, you know, I've worked with over the years. I mean, Don Rickles, who I worked with, you know, last year I met on that show, and Donald Sutherland, who's the only reason Animal House got made, and you know, a lot of people actually. And anyway, so that was after that movie. I was there 9 months. Jim O'Rourke, this guy I met, he and I drove from Belgrade to Madrid because in '69 that was what was called the spaghetti boom. It was a huge rush of production. You know how now it was Canada? You know how it's sometimes it's Louisiana right now, but it always moves around. It was Rome, and then it was London.
The cheapest place to get movies made.
Exactly. Yeah. Is where you can also get money.
Right.
From Franco or from Tito, from some, you know, dishonest person.
But you spent a couple of years in Europe working on a lot of...
Yeah, 2.5 years. I worked in Almeria. Almeria was booming. There was always at least one, if not 6, sometimes 7 feature shooting there. Mostly Italian, but Spanish, British, French, German. I mean, everybody shot there, Americans. And I worked on a hell of a lot of movies, I mean, really a lot of movies, doing all kinds of shit, and had a wonderful time for the most part.